um, about intimacy, particularly how polarity between the different energies can be used to keep it hot and interesting, um, to either attract a new partner if you don't have one and you would like to have one, or to keep the one you have not just interested, but make it fun and deep over the long term. So Karen approached me, we've actually met through some of this work. Um, we've been doing a lot of training outside of our normal professional routines. And what we're talking about today is not therapy per se, but we're actually going into what my teachers have called a yogic art. It's actually using your body and using your heart and your emotional energy of who you are, and how do you communicate that through your body to another person. And we'll start off with we'll just dive right into a couple charged words, masculine and feminine. So when we talk about these, we're actually drawing on a body of work created decades ago by one of my dear teachers, David Data, using language to actually connect and deepen instead of separate. So let's talk about the terms masculine and feminine just a little bit. In the ancient Chinese Taoist tradition, we'd maybe say yang and yin, but that's really not our culture here. So let's talk about as primal energies, the things that actually can be attractive. Just look at the difference between our two bodies here a little bit. So I'm just naturally a little bit more inhabiting the masculine. Karen's pretty radiant. She's got a lot of light coming through her. She's moving even just a little bit. She's got a fireplace in the back. We didn't plan it this way. It's just when I'm really attentive, I get rather still, and I tend to appreciate the beauty around me. It's me in the witness position. So in the masculine, the part of us, and we all have masculine and feminine parts of us in this language we're talking about. The part of you is the witness, the part of you that is the unchanging observer. Almost sounds too simple, but it's really important to point this out. We all have that. It's the part of ourselves that was maybe the same when you were a child or a teenager, or when you woke up this morning. It was kind of you aware of maybe brushing your teeth, or you were aware that you were logging into the webinar. So that would be your masculine. And when you're in the masculine, you tend to come to more stillness, and you're kind of watching and then appreciating. The feminine is everything that changes or moves. And then from that perspective, then it would be our bodies, because they're breathing, they're respirating, they're always growing and dying. We're consuming food, we're metabolizing oxygen. The beautiful Hawaii that I'm looking out over my shoulder here, the window, is profoundly feminine, with all the flowers, the movement of the wind through the palm trees outside, the ocean spray, there's whales jumping right as I'm looking at Karen kind of over the back out the window. It's life itself is always moving and changing, and there's something attractive when you're the witness that kind of loves seeing that movement and that light. And why do people come to Hawaii for vacation? It's nourishing. It tends to pull you out of maybe the place of being lost in subjective perseveration of what's going on inside ourselves. Maybe that's the heart of what some of this tantra that we're talking about is that when we're in a charged sexual situation, it pulls us out of this kind of heavy feeling of being inwardly directed and looking at what we're thinking, what we're feeling all the time. And it brings us into contact with something greater, something potentially outside of ourselves, but there's also this sensation of feeling of fullness and more vibrant aliveness. Now, you could achieve this sitting on a cushion by yourself if you're a masculine practitioner in a practice, or you could maybe achieve that feeling of fullness and ecstasy, dancing with some friends. That would be more of the feminine type expression. But just with that simple definition of, say, the witness and then everything that is actually arising and being, we kind of jump in with the masculine feminine that way, but it doesn't have to be assigned with your gender. It's really specific. So, but the fun of a polarity or energized situation when you're feeling a lot of attraction, there's usually that difference. Someone's playing the pole of being very trustable and the witness, and then someone's playing the pole of I am this. I am this energy, this life force itself. So, Karen, anything to add to that? Because that's, again, probably my masculine perspective of this. I'd be curious on how you heard those terms and how they arise even in your practice, you know.
Yeah, I really resonate with the idea of the feminine, of that which is ever changing and moving, and is the perfect example, the weather. And then the masculine is that which is unchangeable and you know, deep witness. And as a therapist, I'm in the masculine a lot. It's been a very, to practice letting myself be more in my feminine by letting that come out through my body, right? So letting my body move and letting myself kind of like dive into emotion through my body, through my expression, through what I'm wearing. And there's something about, for me, I think I grew up thinking I was more, I think that had you asked me when I was in my 20s if I identified more in the masculine or the feminine, although I'm a cisgendered, like I'm a heterosexual cisgender woman, I think I still identified more with the masculine because I was very used to using like my left brain to figure stuff out, to be analytical, you know, do science and straightforward. But that I learned that was actually more of a coping mechanism of mine. The strength that got co-opted into it got exploited as a coping mechanism. It wasn't my core. And so I found that I'm more feminine at the core, in the sense of when I drop in, being in deep presence definitely nourishes me, but I'm more nourished by letting myself be in the feminine and move and be unpredictable. And it's very scary for me, very scary for lots of reasons. One of which being the feminine is not validated in our world. I think nature's, what you're saying around Hawaii is a perfect example. I think of this author, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She wrote many things, but among them, Women Who Run with the Wolves, and myths of the dangerous old woman, or sorry, the dangerous old woman, myths of the wise woman myth. And she talks about a neighbor she had who was constantly yelling at her for how her flowers would fall in the neighbor's yard. And they were beautiful, but they were messy. And she was saying, well, that's the feminine in us. The feminine is that which the flowers are falling and they're messy and they're beautiful. But this neighbor wanted everything tight and this and this is yours. And and she actually said, she told this sad story that the neighbor cut this beautiful bush that she had because she was so sort of so much friction around the feminine. So, I think that's just one example of how the feminine shows up in nature and in us, the sort of like chaotic, unpredictable beauty. But I have found that when I am not bringing my feminine in relationship, a few things happen. As someone who was more was more sort of conditioned to be in my masculine. And then I chose a profession that while I'm being with emotion, which is quite, the emotion is feminine, I'm being in the sacred masculine role, holding space for the emotion to come up. And especially starting by working with children, and children are the penultimate feminine. Just emotion comes, arises, they have a big tantrum, and then it's over, and now they're ready for lunch, and you're like, what the F just happened? So I was in my masculine, but then in relationship, I would control my partner. I would not be turned on. I would sort of with brains, let's go here, let's at this time. Okay, we're going to be late. Let's get in the car. I'm going to tell you the directions. And then I would get resentful that he wasn't leading and that there was no electricity. It was like I even had one relationship where we created so much beautiful safety with one another. And there was a lot of deep attraction because there's polarity. And I'm sure there were things that he could have been doing, but just from my own perspective, when I started doing work on allowing my feminine and actually specific practices to drop into my feminine, my feeling, body, pleasure, expression of chaos with myself, with partners, then things started to shift in pretty dramatic ways.
So explain.
So I'll pause there. Just.
I mean, people who are watching right now can see the light coming through as you're talking about that. So she's actually getting more and more energized as she was talking. Can you share with us like one of those practices that really shifted something for you? And so people understand what we mean by even a practice, but what did you personally do? How much time did you dedicate to it? And what did you experience?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Yeah. A big one for me is pleasure practice. So for me, what I have done is around anywhere from just 5 minutes, many times a week as I can, anywhere from like 3 to 5 is what I've typically done, where I put on different songs that will evoke different emotions. Like I sort of tap into, what do I think that I'm needing to feel? Not really like, what do I want to feel? Yeah. Avoiding is part of it. What am I avoiding, but also what will nourish me? There's this sort of combination. And then I'll just lay on a yoga mat and I'll let myself breathe and move with my eyes closed in whatever way feels nourishing, feels right in that moment, in whatever way my body wants to. And it could be that I'm sort of just rocking my pelvis slowly and taking deep breaths and letting myself melt into the mat. Maybe I put on sort of a sensual song and let my fingertips touch my skin. Feel like sort of the softness of the carpet, just focusing on anything that feels good. That's the pleasure part, just putting your focus on what feels good. Maybe there's some stuck sadness, so I've been putting on the Mumford and Sons song, I Will Wait. I feel like they can always evoke tears, and just like, hit the ground or throw a pillow or yell. I'll even tell my roommate, I'm going to do some cathartic practices, and she's gotten used to it, and it's like gives her permission to be wherever she's at too. So whether it's letting myself feel my pleasure or drop into slowness because I've been going and do, or cry or rage or feel longing. If the feminine is all of the different energies that can exist, then embodying some of those for a few minutes a day. That's just one practice that comes up.